The warning came through every communication channel at once. Red lights flashed across the central command room of the Galactic Council. Ambassador Krelinoth felt his 3 hearts sink as he read the message. Another star system had gone dark. That made 17 in the past month. Krelinoth stood in the Grand Chamber where representatives from 40 different species gathered in emergency session. His insect-like body trembled as he watched the holographic display showing the advancing threat. The Devourers had returned and they were hungry. For 1,000 years, the ancient enemy had slept in the darkness between galaxies. Now they were awake, and their hunger was impossible to satisfy. They consumed everything in their path, turning entire worlds into empty husks. The Galactic Council had tried everything. Their most powerful weapons barely slowed the advance. Their shields collapsed within minutes of contact. Their best scientists had no answers. The species and the Council had built their civilization on peace and cooperation. They explored the stars with wonder, not weapons. They believed that intelligence and diplomacy could solve any problem. But the Devourers did not negotiate. They did not communicate. They only consumed. Krelinoth had spent decades studying species across the galaxy. He had read about cultures that rose and fell, about wars that ended civilizations, about peaceful societies and violent ones. Among all the data he collected, one species stood out for all the wrong reasons: humans. The Council had discovered Earth 40 years ago. They observed from a distance, watching with fascination and horror. Humans fought constantly. They had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times with weapons that could crack their own planet. Their history was written in blood and conflict. Every generation seemed to find new ways to kill each other more efficiently. The Council decided to quarantine Earth, keep humanity isolated until they matured. If they ever did, let them solve their own problems without bringing their violence to the peaceful galaxy. The decision was unanimous. No one wanted these dangerous creatures among the stars. But now, as Krelinoth stood before the Council with his proposal, that decision seemed short-sighted. The chamber fell silent when he spoke the words that many considered unthinkable. "We need to ask the humans for help." The reaction was immediate. Representatives from the peaceful Valorian species recoiled in disgust. The wise elders of Proxima shook their heads sadly. Even Krelinoth's own people, the diplomatic Zen, questioned his sanity. "They are savages," someone shouted. "We cannot unleash such violence into our civilization." "They kill their own kind for resources," another voice added. "What would they do to us?" Krelinoth waited for the anger to subside. He had expected this reaction. He shared their concerns. But he also knew what the alternative was. "The Devourers will reach the core worlds in 3 months," he said quietly. "Our children will be consumed. Our history will be erased. Every species in this chamber will cease to exist." He paused, letting that reality sink in. "The humans are violent, yes, but they are also survivors. They have fought wars we cannot imagine and lived to tell about it. They understand something we have forgotten. They know how to win." The debate lasted for hours. Some argued that death with honor was better than asking for help from such a primitive species. Others suggested fleeing to another galaxy entirely. A few even proposed surrendering to the Devourers, hoping for mercy that would never come. In the end, fear won over pride. The vote was close, but it passed. Krelinoth would go to Earth and ask the impossible. He would beg the monsters to save them from monsters. The journey to Earth took 3 days. Krelinoth used that time to prepare what he would say. How do you ask a species you rejected to risk everything for you? How do you tell them that you need the very violence you once condemned? Earth's defense network detected his ship immediately. Within minutes, he was surrounded by human military vessels. They were nothing like the elegant ships of the Council. These craft were angular and brutal, covered in thick armor and bristling with weapons. Even approaching the planet felt dangerous. They brought him to a facility in a place called Geneva. The building was underground, reinforced against attack. Everything about it screamed paranoia and preparation for war. Krelinoth thought about his own people's capital, with its open gardens and transparent walls that celebrated peace. The contrast could not be greater. Admiral Sarah Chen entered the briefing room. Krelinoth immediately understood why humans were so feared. Her eyes were cold and calculating, missing nothing. She moved with controlled precision, like a predator conserving energy. When she spoke, her voice was steady and hard. "You've come a long way to visit a quarantined species. This must be important." Krelinoth explained everything. The devourers, the failing defenses, the desperate situation. He showed her the data, the projections, the estimated time until total collapse. He explained how Council weapons proved useless, how their peaceful nature left them unprepared for this kind of enemy. Admiral Chen listened without interrupting. She asked questions about enemy capabilities, numbers, and last known positions. Military questions, tactical questions. She did not ask about payment or concessions or what humanity would gain from helping. That surprised Krelinoth more than anything. "You don't want anything in return?" he finally asked. Chen looked at him with those hard eyes. "You're asking us to fight monsters that eat entire civilizations. People who destroy innocent lives for no reason except hunger." She leaned forward. "Ambassador, that's all the reason we need." Something in her voice made Krelinoth realize his mistake. The Council saw humans as mindless savages who loved violence. But Chen's eyes held something else. Purpose, conviction, a deep belief that some things were worth fighting for. "How long do you need to prepare?" Krelinoth asked. 72 hours, Chen replied. "We'll mobilize the fleet and meet your forces at the coordinates you provided." 72 hours? Krelinoth could not hide his shock. "Admiral, this is a full military deployment. Surely you need more time to prepare, to plan, to ambassador." Chen interrupted. "We've been preparing for a war in space since we first looked at the stars. We just didn't know who the enemy would be." She stood, signaling the meeting was over. "Humanity will help you, but I need you to understand something. The way we fight, the weapons we use, the tactics we employ, they might disturb you. Your people invited us because you need killers. We're going to give you exactly that." As Krelinoth left Earth, he looked back at the blue planet hanging in space. Ships were already moving, massive war machines emerging from hidden bases on the moon and in the asteroid belt. He had thought asking for help would be the hard part. Now he realized that dealing with the consequences might be even harder. The Council wanted salvation. They were about to get it. But Krelinoth wondered if they truly understood the price they would pay for letting humanity off its leash. The mobilization happened faster than Krelinoth thought possible. He remained on Earth for 2 days, watching in amazement and growing terror as humanity prepared for war. Every nation on the planet contributed. Ships that had been disguised as mining vessels revealed weapon systems. Peaceful research stations transformed into military command centers. Soldiers who had been living normal lives reported for duty within hours. Admiral Chen gave Krelinoth access to observe the preparations. He wished she hadn't. What he saw would haunt him forever. The human warships were nothing like the graceful vessels of the Galactic Council. Council ships were designed for beauty and efficiency, with smooth curves and elegant lines. They looked like art pieces floating through space. Human ships looked like weapons. Angular, brutal, covered in thick armor plating. Every surface bristled with gun batteries, missile pods, and systems Krelinoth didn't recognize. He watched as a massive carrier called the Indomitable moved into position. The ship was 3 kilometers long, its hull scarred from weapons testing. Hundreds of fighter craft nested in its belly, each one designed for one purpose: killing. The pilots who would fly those fighters were already training, running simulation after simulation of combat scenarios. "How many fighters does that ship carry?" Krelinoth asked the human officer assigned to guide him. 400, the officer replied casually, "and enough munitions to level a small moon." Krelinoth's translator unit struggled with some of the military terminology. When he asked for clarification, the explanations only made things worse. Kinetic kill vehicles, plasma cutters, armor-piercing warheads, chemical weapons, biological agents. Each new term represented another way humans had invented to destroy their enemies. The most disturbing moment came when they toured a ship. marked with bright yellow symbols. Biohazard warnings covered its hull. Inside, scientists worked in sealed laboratories, handling materials that made Krellinus' skin crawl. "What is this ship?" he asked. "Biological Warfare Division," the officer explained. "If the Devourers are organic, we can design weapons specifically to target their biology. Viruses, bacteria, toxins, whatever works. The Galactic Council banned such weapons 10,000 years ago," Krellineth said weakly. The officer shrugged. "We're not part of your council. And right now, I'd say you're pretty grateful for that." The comment stung because it was true. The council had spent millennia building a civilization of peace. They had abolished weapons of mass destruction, chemical warfare, and anything they deemed too cruel for civilized beings. Now those civilized beings were about to be eaten alive. Their only hope was a species that never stopped inventing new ways to kill. "Admiral," Chen called a final briefing before the fleet departed. Krelinoth stood in the command center, surrounded by human military leaders from every nation. They spoke in quick, efficient sentences, coordinating a military operation involving hundreds of ships and thousands of personnel. The speed and precision of their planning impressed him. These people had done this before, many times. "Our primary objective is clear," Chen announced to the assembled officers. "Protect Galactic Council territories and eliminate the Devourer threat. We will engage with maximum force and accept no half measures. This enemy does not negotiate, does not retreat, does not show mercy. Neither will we." The officers responded with sharp acknowledgments. No debates, no questions about whether maximum force was appropriate. They understood the mission and accepted it completely. Chen turned to Krellineth. "Ambassador, I need you to understand our rules of engagement. When we enter combat, we will use every weapon at our disposal. Some of those weapons your people will find disturbing. Some of them you might call barbaric. But I will not handicap my forces to make your council comfortable. If you want us to win, you need to let us fight our way." Krellineth thought about the peaceful species depending on him. He thought about the children who would die if the Devourers continued their advance. He thought about the burden of the choice he was making. "Do what you must," he said quietly. The fleet launched on the third day exactly as Admiral Chen promised. Krelinoth watched from the observation deck of the flagship as hundreds of human vessels moved into formation. Carriers, destroyers, frigates, support ships, and vessels whose purposes he couldn't identify. They moved with military precision, each captain knowing exactly where to position their ship. The jump to faster than light, travel felt different in a human ship. Council vessels made the transition smoothly, barely noticeable. The human ship shuddered and groaned as if forcing its way through space rather than gliding through it. Everything about humans seemed to be about force and power rather than elegance and efficiency. During the 3-day journey to the combat zone, Krellineth spent time with the human crew. He wanted to understand these people who terrified him and represented his only hope. What he found surprised him. The soldiers were young, many barely adults by human standards. They laughed and joked with each other, shared pictures of their families, talked about their homes. They seemed so normal, so much like any other species. But when alarms sounded for combat drills, they transformed. The laughter stopped. Their faces became hard and focused. They moved with deadly purpose. Each person knowing their role perfectly. He met a fighter pilot named Marcus, a young man with kind eyes and an easy smile. Marcus showed him pictures of his daughter, a small girl with her father's smile. "She's beautiful," Krellineth said. "She's the reason I'm here," Marcus replied. "When the Admiral said there were monsters out there eating innocent people, eating kids like my daughter, I volunteered immediately. Nobody does that to children? Not while I'm breathing." Krellineth realized something then. The Council had misunderstood humans completely. They weren't violent because they loved destruction. They were violent because they loved something else more. They fought because they had something worth protecting. On the final night before reaching the combat zone, Admiral Chen invited Krelinoth to her private office. The room was sparse, functional. A single picture sat on her desk, showing a young woman in military uniform. "My daughter," Chen said, noticing his gaze. She died in the Mars conflict 15 years ago. She was 23. I'm sorry for your loss, Krellanath said. Chen was quiet for a moment. Every person on this fleet has lost someone to war. We know the cost better than anyone. That's why we're here. Not because we love fighting, but because we know what happens when good people refuse to fight. She looked directly at him. Your council chose peace and prosperity. That's admirable. But you also chose to forget that peace has to be defended. Someone has to stand in the darkness and face the monsters. For thousands of years, that's been humanity's job on Earth. Now we'll do it for the galaxy. The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Valorian system. Ahead lay the battlefield, and beyond that, the advancing Devourers. Krellanath felt his heart racing. He had brought humanity to war. Now the galaxy would see what humans could really do. The Valorian system was dying. Krellanath watched the tactical display with growing horror as the human fleet approached. 3 planets that once held billions of lives now showed no signs of civilization. The Devourers had consumed everything, leaving only barren rocks behind. The Galactic Council's defensive fleet was locked in desperate combat near the 4th planet. 20 ships, representing the most advanced technology the peaceful galaxy could produce, fought against an enemy that seemed impossible to stop. Energy weapons blazed across space, shields flickered and failed, and one by one, council ships went dark. The Devourers were like nothing Krellanath had seen in all his years of studying alien species. They weren't machines or traditional biological creatures. They were something in between, something wrong. Massive bioships the size of moons, their hulls made of living tissue that pulsed and regenerated. Smaller attack organisms swarmed around them like insects, each one capable of tearing through a ship's hull. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, studying the battle through cold, analytical eyes. Her officers fed her information in rapid succession. Enemy numbers, movement patterns, weapon effectiveness. She absorbed it all, saying nothing, just watching. Krellanath stood beside her, watching the council ships fall back. Admiral, we must help them immediately. They cannot hold much longer. 12 more minutes, Chen replied calmly, but they're dying. And rushing in without understanding our enemy would mean we die too. Chen pointed to the tactical display. The Devourers adapt to energy weapons. Every time your ships hit them, they adjust. By the time the same weapon fires again, it's useless. She nodded to herself. Good thing we don't use energy weapons. The 12 minutes felt like hours. 3 more council ships were destroyed. The Valorian defenders were preparing to retreat, to abandon their own homeworld to the monsters. Then Admiral Chen's voice cut across the command channel. All ships, weapons free. Engage the enemy. The human fleet moved forward like a tidal wave of steel. Unlike the precise, cautious movements of council ships, the human vessels accelerated hard and fast, closing the distance at speeds that seemed reckless. The Devourers noticed the new arrivals and shifted their attention. Thousands of attack organisms broke away from the council ships and swarmed toward the humans. What happened next would be discussed in military academies for generations. The human ships opened fire, and the weapons were primitive by council standards. No sophisticated energy beams or exotic particles, just metal and explosives, launched at incredible speeds. Railguns fired solid slugs of tungsten alloy at relativistic velocities. Missile pods unleashed swarms of warheads. Point defense systems created walls of bullets in space. The devourer organisms, those walls simply ceased to exist. Their ability to adapt meant nothing against thousands of dumb metal projectiles. Their regeneration couldn't keep pace with high explosives that detonated inside their bodies. Within 3 minutes, the swarm was reduced to scattered survivors fleeing back to the bioships. Target the large vessels, Chen ordered. Fire everything. The bioships were massive, each one carrying enough smaller organisms to overwhelm a planet. Their living hulls were meters thick, designed to regenerate faster than any weapon could damage them. The Council had learned this the hard way, watching their most powerful weapons create wounds that sealed themselves within seconds. Human missiles struck the bioships by the hundreds. Standard explosives cratered the hulls. Armor-piercing warheads burrowed deep before detonating. But the real damage came from something else, something that made Krellanath's blood run cold. Some missiles didn't explode. They released payloads of burning chemicals that spread across the bioship's hulls like wildfire. In the vacuum of space, the compounds should have been useless. But human scientists had designed them specifically for this environment. They burned without oxygen, eating through organic tissue, creating wounds that couldn't heal. Other missiles carried biological weapons, engineered viruses that attacked the Devourer's cellular structure. The bioships began to rot from the inside out, their own bodies turning against them. Krellanath watched in horror and fascination. The Council had spent months trying to stop these creatures, achieving nothing. Humans had studied them for 12 minutes and found 3 different ways to kill them. How? He whispered. How did you know what weapons to use? An officer standing nearby answered. We've been fighting biological threats on Earth for thousands of years. Viruses, bacteria, parasites, invasive species. We know how to kill things that adapt and evolve. The officer's voice held a grim pride. Life always finds a way, Ambassador. But so do we. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human fighters, piloted by men and women with neural implants that let them react faster than any normal being, dove into swarms of organisms. They flew with a recklessness that made Krellanath's hearts race, making impossible maneuvers, accepting insane risks. Many died. Their ships were destroyed, their lives snuffed out in moments. But they kept coming, wave after wave, placing losses faster than the Devourers could inflict them. Marcus, the pilot who had shown Krellanath pictures of his daughter, flew in one of those wings. Krellanath watched his fighter on the tactical display, weaving through enemy fire with incredible skill. Then a lucky hit from a Devourer organism clipped his wing. The fighter spun out of control, heading directly into a bioship's mouth-like opening. Marcus didn't eject. Instead, he accelerated. His fighter, damaged and leaking atmosphere, dove straight into the bioship. The explosion that followed was nuclear, one of humanity's most forbidden weapons, used without hesitation. The bioship shuddered and began to break apart from the inside. Fighter down, an officer reported. Marcus confirmed, killed in action, noted Admiral Chen replied, her voice flat. Continue the assault. Krellanath felt sick. Marcus had seemed so alive, so human. Now he was gone, vaporized along with his enemy. And the humans just continued fighting as if nothing had happened. But later, when he looked closer, he saw the truth. The pilots who flew alongside Marcus fought harder after his death. The weapons crews loaded their guns faster. The entire fleet seemed to channel their grief into fury. Humans didn't mourn during battle. They avenged. By the time the last Devourer organism was destroyed, the human fleet had taken heavy losses. 15 ships severely damaged, 3 completely destroyed. Over 2,000 crew members dead. But they had one. The Valorian system was saved. The Council ships, those that survived, maintained a careful distance from the human fleet. Krellanath understood why. They had just witnessed something that shattered their understanding of warfare. The humans hadn't just defeated the Devourers. They had overwhelmed them completely, using weapons and tactics that the peaceful galaxy had outlawed for good reasons. Admiral Chen contacted the Council Fleet Commander, a Valorian named Telmoth. Your system is secure. We'll maintain position here while you evacuate any survivors from the planets. Telmoth's voice shook when he replied, Admiral Chen, on behalf of the Valorian people, I thank you. You've saved countless lives today. He hesitated. But the weapons you used, the tactics you employed, they were effective, Chen interrupted. They were effective. That's all that matters. After the transmission ended, Chen turned to Krellanath. Her face showed the strain of command, the weight of the lives lost under her orders. You asked us to fight monsters, Ambassador. This is what it looks like. This is what it costs. She gestured to the casualty reports scrolling across her screen. These people died so your people could live. Remember that when your council starts questioning our methods. Krelinoth looked at the tactical display at the debris field that marked where the battle had been fought. Human and devourer remains mixed together in the darkness. He thought about Marcus and his daughter, about Admiral Chen and her lost child, about all the humans who came to fight for people they'd never met. The Galactic Council had called humans savages, but savages didn't sacrifice themselves for strangers. Savages didn't carry the weight of every death with such visible pain. Humans were something else entirely. They were warriors, true warriors, who understood that sometimes the only way to protect innocent life was to become very good at ending it. The war continued for 8 weeks. And with each passing day, Krelinath watched the Galactic Council's relief turn to unease, then to fear. Not fear of the Devourers, fear of their saviors. The human fleet pushed deeper into Devourer-controlled space, liberating system after system. They moved with ruthless efficiency, never stopping to rest, never slowing their advance. Admiral Chen coordinated the campaign from her flagship, a mobile command center that seemed to never sleep. Neither did she, surviving on stimulants and sheer will. Krelinath accompanied the fleet throughout the campaign, sending regular reports back to the Council. Those reports grew increasingly troubled. The humans were winning, yes, but their methods disturbed everyone who witnessed them in the Tertian system. The Devourers had occupied 3 planets, consuming most of the population, but leaving pockets of survivors to serve as food sources. The Council wanted to mount a careful rescue operation, using precision strikes to avoid damaging the remaining infrastructure. Admiral Chen had different ideas. "We saturate the infected zones with chemical agents," she explained at the briefing. "Kill every devourer organism on the surface simultaneously. Then we evacuate survivors." "But the chemicals will poison the planets," a Council observer protested. "It will take decades to make them habitable again." "Deader decades than never," Chen replied coldly. "If we try your careful approach, the Devourers will adapt and use the survivors as shields. We'll lose more lives trying to save infrastructure than if we just accept the damage and move on." The Council reluctantly agreed. The chemical bombardment worked perfectly. Every devourer on those 3 planets died within hours. So did the forests, the oceans, and every other living thing. The survivors were rescued from sealed bunkers, but they emerged to worlds that looked like they had been dead for centuries. Krelinath stood on one of those poisoned worlds, wearing a protective suit, looking at the gray wasteland. A Tertian child, one of the survivors, stared at the dead landscape with empty eyes. Her entire world had been sterilized to save her life. Krelinoth wondered if that could be called a victory. The tension between humans and the astute Council reached a breaking point at the breeding station. Deep Space Reconnaissance discovered a massive devourer facility hidden in an asteroid field. Inside were thousands of young organisms, not yet mature enough to pose a threat. The Council convened an emergency session to discuss what to do with them. "This is a unique opportunity," argued Elder Ventar of the Proxima species. "We can study these creatures, understand their biology, perhaps even find a way to domesticate them or redirect their behavior. Think of the scientific knowledge we could gain." The vote was close, but the Council decided to preserve the breeding station. They sent the order to Admiral Chen, expecting compliance. Instead, they received a flat refusal. "Absolutely not," Chen said when Krelinath delivered the order. "Those things are an existential threat to every living being in this galaxy. We destroy them today, and we don't look back." "Admiral, the Council has made its decision. These are their territories. They have the right to. They have the right to commit suicide if they want," Chen interrupted. "They don't have the right to endanger my people or any other species with their curiosity. We didn't come here to play scientist. We came here to eliminate a threat." Krelinoth tried diplomacy, tried reasoning, tried everything he could think of. Chen listened politely, then gave the order anyway. Human destroyers moved into position and launched their missiles. The breeding station was vaporized completely, along with every young devourer inside. The Council was furious. Accusations of war crimes flooded the communication channels. Several species threatened to withdraw their support for the human campaign. Some even suggested that the humans were becoming as dangerous as the Devourers themselves. Admiral Chen's response to the council was brief and cutting. You don't negotiate with cancer. You don't study it and hope to tame it. You cut it out completely, or it comes back. If you can't understand that, then you haven't learned anything from this war. Krellaneth found himself caught between two worlds. He understood the council's concerns. The humans were using terrible weapons, making choices that seemed to disregard all morality. But he also saw the results. Systems were being liberated. The Devourer advance had not just stopped, it had reversed. Humanity was winning a war that everyone else had given up as lost. The human casualties mounted steadily. By the 6th week, they had lost 30% of their combat personnel. Ships that had left Earth pristine and powerful now bore the scars of dozens of battles. Crews worked around the clock to repair damage, often holding ships together with improvised patches and determination. Krellaneth watched a human engineering crew work on a damaged destroyer. They had been at it for 18 hours straight, welding hull plates in the vacuum of space. When he asked their supervisor why they didn't rest, the woman looked at him like he was crazy. Rest. Admiral Chen says we push on to the Devourer homeworld in 3 days. This ship needs to be ready. My crew will sleep when the war is over? That attitude was universal among the humans. They pushed themselves beyond any reasonable limit, accepted losses that would have caused any council species to sue for peace, and kept fighting. Krellaneth tried to understand where this endurance came from. He found part of the answer in the ship's memorial room. Every human vessel had one, a space dedicated to remembering the fallen. Photographs of dead crew members covered the walls, along with personal items and handwritten notes. Krellaneth read some of the notes. There were messages from the living to the dead, promises to finish the mission, vows to make the sacrifice worthwhile. A young soldier named Chen, no relation to the Admiral, found him there. It helps, she said quietly. Knowing that if we fall, someone will remember. Someone will finish what we started. Your species has an unusual relationship with death, Krellaneth observed. Chen smiled sadly. We know we're mortal. We know our time is limited, so we try to make it count. We try to leave the galaxy a little better than we found it, even if it costs us everything. She touched one of the photographs, a man about her age. That's my brother. He died in the first battle at Valorian. He was 26. Had a wife back home, a baby he never got to meet. Her voice broke slightly. But because he fought, because he died, millions of Valorians lived. That has to mean something. The final push toward the Devourer homeworld began in the 8th week. Intelligence reports indicated a massive concentration of bioships, defending a planet-sized organism hidden in a dying nebula. The Devourer's primary breeding ground, their heart, their source. If that fell, the entire species would collapse. Admiral Chen called a fleet-wide briefing. Every ship captain, every squadron leader, every unit commander listened as she laid out the plan. It was simple and brutal. They would assault the homeworld with everything they had. No holding back. No reserves. One massive push to end the war. This will be the hardest battle we've fought, Chen told them. Casualties will be extreme. Some of you won't make it home, but what we do in the next 48 hours will determine whether this galaxy has a future. Whether the Galactic Council survives, whether billions of innocent beings get to live their lives in peace. She paused, and her voice softened, just slightly. You've already done more than anyone had the right to ask. You've saved countless lives. You've proven that humanity belongs among the stars. Whatever happens next, remember that. You are heroes, every single one of you. The fleet moved toward the nebula. Krellaneth stood on the bridge watching the swirling clouds of gas and dust grow closer. Somewhere in that darkness waited the final battle. He thought about all the sacrifices that had brought them here, all the lives lost, all the moral compromises made. He thought about Marcus and his daughter, about Chen's brother and his unborn child, about Admiral Chen herself, carrying the weight of every death. The peaceful galaxy had called humanity monsters. But monsters didn't mourn their fallen. Monsters didn't sacrifice themselves for strangers. Monsters didn't carry such visible pain in their eyes. These weren't monsters. They were something far more dangerous to the Devourers. They were humans, and they had found something worth dying for. The nebula was beautiful and terrible. Clouds of gas glowed in shades of purple and red, illuminated by dying stars. Somewhere deep inside, hidden behind layers of cosmic dust, lay the Devourer homeworld. The human fleet entered slowly, sensors straining to pierce the interference. The attack came from everywhere at once. Bioships emerged from the nebula's depths by the hundreds, each one carrying swarms of smaller organisms. This was the Devourer's last stand, and they held nothing back. The largest bioship Krellanath had ever seen appeared at the center of their formation. A living nightmare 3 times the size of Earth's moon. "That's it," Admiral Chen said quietly. "That's the Queen. The source of everything." The battle that followed made every previous engagement look small. The Devourers fought with desperate fury, throwing themselves at the human fleet in waves that seemed endless. Human ships returned fire with everything they had. But for every enemy destroyed, 2 more appeared from the nebula's depths. Krellanath watched the casualty reports climb with horrifying speed. 10 ships destroyed in the first hour, 15 more severely damaged. The human fleet pressed forward anyway, pushing through the enemy swarm with bloody determination. Fighter pilots made suicide runs, ramming their craft into bioships when their ammunition ran out. Damaged vessels refused to retreat, staying in formation even as their hulls buckled and their crews died. A frigate called the Defiant lost its main engines and began to drift. The captain, a woman named Rodriguez, broadcast her final transmission to the fleet. "This is Defiant. We're dead in space. Crew is evacuating." And there was a pause. Then her voice came back, harder than steel. "Remaining command crew is staying. We still have weapons. We still have reactor power." Another pause. "Give them hell, Admiral. Make this count." The Defiant's reactor detonated 5 minutes later, taking 3 bioships with it. Rodriguez and her command crew became another 47 names on humanity's memorial lists. Admiral Chen stood on her bridge, watching her fleet die around her. Her face was carved from stone, showing nothing, but Krellanath could see her hands shaking. Every loss hit her personally. Every death was a weight she carried. But she never hesitated, never pulled back. She pushed forward because that was the only way to end this. The human fleet reached the Queen after 6 hours of continuous combat. 40% of their ships were destroyed or disabled. Casualties exceeded 8,000. But they had broken through the defensive swarm, and now the Queen lay exposed before them. "All ships," Chen ordered. "Fire everything. I want that thing dead." The humans had saved their most powerful weapons for this moment. Every operational ship launched its remaining missiles. Railguns fired until their barrels glowed white-hot. The specialized biological warfare ships released their final payloads. Engineered viruses designed specifically to kill this particular organism. The Queen fought back, birthing new organisms even as she died. Her massive body rippled and convulsed, trying to regenerate, trying to adapt. But there was no adapting to the sheer volume of destruction humanity unleashed. The Queen began to break apart, her biology collapsing under the assault. Admiral Chen made the final decision. "Prepare the planet killers. Authorization Chanalpha 7. Target the Queen's core." A junior officer's voice shook as he responded. "Admiral, those weapons are banned by the Geneva Protocol." "If we use them, then we use them," Chen interrupted. "This ends today. This ends now. Fire." 6 missiles, each carrying fusion warheads and biological payloads that would poison a world for millennia, streaked toward the dying Queen. They penetrated deep into her core before detonating. The explosion lit up the entire nebula. The Queen's death scream, transmitted through some unknown means, reached across space. Every devourer organism in the system stopped moving for one moment, then collapsed. Silence fell across the battlefield. The devourers were gone. The war was over. The human fleet limped home 3 weeks later. Of the 400 ships that had left Earth, only 250 remained. 180,000 people had left to fight. 72,000 came home. The rest stayed behind, buried in space. their bodies drifting among the stars they had died to protect. The Galactic Council held a ceremony to honor the human fleet. Representatives from every member species attended. Monuments were commissioned. Trade agreements were drafted. Formal apologies were issued for humanity's previous quarantine. The council chamber rang with speeches about courage, sacrifice, and humanity's place among the stars. Admiral Chen stood before the assembled council to receive their highest honor. She wore her dress uniform, pristine and perfect, hiding the exhaustion that had carved lines into her face. Krelanath watched her climb the steps to the podium, moving like someone decades older than she was. The war had aged her. When Chen spoke, her voice carried across the chamber, and the assembled species fell silent. "I accept this honor on behalf of the 72,000 humans who did not return home," she began. "They died far from Earth, fighting for people they had never met, protecting worlds they would never see. They are the ones who deserve to stand here, not me." She paused, and when she continued, her voice held an edge that made Krelanath nervous. "You have thanked us for winning your war. You have praised our courage. But I need you to understand what this war cost us. 180,000 people left Earth to answer your call. Young people, people with families, people with entire lives ahead of them. 72,000 died. Many others came home broken, haunted by what they saw, what they did, what they became." The chamber was utterly silent now. "You asked us to be monsters so you wouldn't have to. That's a burden we'll carry for generations. Every weapon we used, every life we took, every choice we made, it stains our souls. We did terrible things in this war. Necessary things, but terrible nonetheless." Chun's hands gripped the podium. "So when you celebrate your peace, when you return to your beautiful worlds and perfect societies, remember who paid for it. Remember that somewhere in human space, there are children who will never see their parents again. Remember that we carry the nightmares so you don't have to." She straightened, and her voice became formal again. "Humanity proposes the following. We will maintain a permanent military fleet stationed at the edge of Council space. We will be your first line of defense against external threats. We will do what peaceful species cannot do. We will stand guard in the darkness." "Oh." She paused. "In exchange, we ask only one thing. Treat us as equals, not as useful savages. Not as attack dogs to be called only in crisis, as equals who sacrificed everything to protect this galaxy." The council debated for 3 days. Some species supported humanity's proposal enthusiastically, grateful for their sacrifice. Others feared what it meant to have such a powerful military force permanently positioned near their worlds. Still others questioned whether humanity could be trusted with such power. The compromise they reached satisfied no one completely. Humanity could maintain their fleet, but with strict limitations on size and weapons. A demilitarized zone would separate human and council space. Certain weapons, the ones deemed too terrible even for war, would be banned from human ships. Inspections would occur regularly to ensure compliance. When Krelanath delivered the council's decision to Admiral Chen, expected anger. Instead, she just looked tired. "They're afraid of us," she said. "I understand that. We showed them what we're capable of. We reminded them that violence exists in the universe, and sometimes it's necessary." She smiled without humor. "They'll take our protection, but they don't want to look at us too closely. They don't want to acknowledge what we did for them. Some understand," Krelanath said. "The Valorians remember. The Tertians, despite their poisoned worlds, remember. Those we saved, they know what you did. And the others will forget," Chen replied. "In a generation or two, we'll just be the violent humans again. The warmongers who can't be trusted. The savages who happen to be useful ones." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at Earth. "But that's fine. We didn't do this for recognition. We did it because it was right." The final meeting between Chen and Krelanath happened on Earth, in the memorial garden that had been built for the fallen. 72,000 names were carved into black stone, arranged in no particular order. Officers and enlisted, pilots and engineers, veterans and new recruits, all equal in death, all remembered. I misjudged your species, Krelinoth admitted. I thought you were savages who loved violence. I was wrong, Chen said quietly. You were partly right. We are good at violence. Better than any species you've ever encountered. We've spent our entire history perfecting the art of war. She touched one of the names on the wall. But we're good at it because we know what we're protecting. Every human who died out there did so believing they were saving innocent lives. That's not savagery. That's purpose. She turned to face him. Your council chose to forget how to fight because fighting is ugly and cruel. We never had that luxury. On Earth, we've always had someone trying to kill us. Nature, disease, each other. We learned to survive by being tougher than whatever wanted us dead. Now we'll do the same for the galaxy. Will you regret it? Krelinoth asked. Becoming what you became to win this war? Chen was quiet for a long moment. Every day for the rest of my life, she finally said. But I'll also remember the millions of lives we saved. The children who got to grow up because we fought. The civilizations that survived because we stood guard. If that requires carrying nightmares, then we'll carry them. 3 months later, the Human Defense Fleet took its position at the edge of Galactic Council space. 200 warships, crewed by volunteers who understood what they were signing up for. Silent guardians, standing watch over a civilization that both needed them and feared them. Krelinoth returned to his duties as ambassador, serving as a bridge between humanity and the Council. He spent his remaining years ensuring that the sacrifice of those 72,000 was not forgotten, that humanity was treated with the respect they had earned. On quiet nights, he would think about Marcus and his daughter, about Rodriguez and the Defiant, about all the humans who had died to save a galaxy that barely acknowledged them. He would remember Admiral Chen's words about purpose and protection, about being willing to become monsters to protect the innocent. The galaxy slept peacefully, protected by the deadliest fleet ever assembled. And those who slept safely tried not to think too much about the humans who stood guard in the darkness, carrying burdens that would break any other species. They were humanity's gift to the stars, terrible, necessary, and forever vigilant.